Alright, in this video I'm going over the game theory of bullying, and my purpose here really is to show you how game theory can be used in an analysis of a situation and in thinking through policies that might help a situation. So when you encounter game theory in your game theory textbooks, a lot of times the payoffs are just given to you. And you need that when you're learning game theory. You need to sort of figure out how does it work. But when you're actually out there in the real world analyzing policy to try to figure out how do you change the incentives at play, you have to come up with those payoffs from scratch. And those payoffs are going to determine the whole game. And if you're thinking through policy, you're going to be wanting to think through how do we change the payoffs to get a different outcome. So I'm going to walk through a process of that. And when I sat down to model the game theory of bullying, it actually became a little bit more complex than I expected. So I think there's actually going to be 3 games that are necessary. So first of all, bullying is a really broad category. There's lots of different types of bullying. Adult bullying is different than teenager bullying, which is different than 5th grader bullying. And to keep this simple, this particular analysis is going to be about 5th grade bullying. Now, I hope you can use some of the analysis to think through other bullying situations, but right now we're going to imagine that we are on a council to address bullying in 5th grade schoolyards. So I know social media is a big issue with bullying right now. I'm not even going to look at that. That's for another day. This is really just to imagine groups of friends in the 5th grade schoolyard where we might notice some groups of friends have no bullying and other groups of friends have 1 or 2 people in the group who bully a lot. And so we want to think through how do we as adults deal with this situation. And I want to preview my own solution and sort of this gets at my own perspective on this. The ideal situation is to have members of each social group who have the courage to say no to a bully. Like if someone in their group bullies another person, you want them to step in and say, hey, no, we don't do that in this group. We don't treat people like that. And that is an act of integrity. My preference would be to have lots of people in the real world who have the courage and the values and the conviction to actually stand up to a bully in as good a way as possible. You don't need to bully the bully to do that. It's best just to be like, we don't do that around here. So when I think this through, I'm going to be trying to come up with how do we create incentives to create more people who are willing to do that. More 5th graders who are willing to do that, more 5th graders who have seen that done successfully and with integrity. And so that's where I'm going. Now, there's gonna need to be 3 games. When I fully thought through what's going on, I think there's a bunch of different moments where decisions are being made by different people in the group. So I'm actually going to model all 3, and this is gonna take 3 videos to do that. Before I do that, I'd like to just set up what are the 3 games I'm going to lay out. Now, all of these are going to be between the bully and another friend in the group. So they're set up as 2-player games, but of course every other friend who's not the bully plays the friend role. And as a matter of fact, every member of the group also plays the bully role because the bully's first decision is to decide, do you bully someone or not? And the friend's decision is going to be, do you stand up for the victim or not? That's the simple first game we're going to look at. And I believe there are 2 more scenarios here that do play out and are important to that game. The second game we're going to model is what happens after that first situation. So we're imagining a scenario where the bully has bullied, where another member of the group has defended the victim and stood up to the bully. At that point, everybody else in the group has a decision to make, and that is, do you side with the bully or do you side with the person defending the victim? And at that point, the bully also has a decision. The bully has to decide, do I back down and say, okay, fine, I won't do that? Or do I challenge the person who challenged me? And that's going to be the second game we look at. It's going to be after there's been a bullying, a confrontation of one member of the group, what does the rest of the group decide to do and how does the bully respond? That will be our second game. And then our third game is actually a long run game. And the reason I think this one is important is that research has shown that bullies don't fare that well in the long run. They might have a high social status in their group during the period in 5th grade when they're bullying, but in the long run, they have a lot of social problems. They have problems creating friends, problems maintaining friendships, and so I wanted a game that captured that dynamic. And I'm imagining a situation where a group of friends allows the bully to continue to bully for a while because that happens in the real world and we need to model it. In this case, the situation is, do you stay friends with this bully, or do you find a different friend group or migrate somewhere else so that you're no longer friends with the bully? That's the decision each member of the group has to make if they're in a group where one member's bullying people a lot. And of course, the bully's decision is, do I bully frequently or do I not bully? Alright, those are the 3 games. We're starting in this video with the first of those 3 games. Alright, so we've set up the payoff matrix, and let's start off by developing a bully objective function, or a bully utility function. So our choice variable here is going to be bullying, and we could make that continuous as like how often to bully or how severely to bully if we wanted, but in this game theory matrix it's just binary, do you bully or not? So first we need to ask ourselves, why do the bullies bully? And at this point in the analysis, we're actually just brainstorming different motives, different reasons why the bully might bully. So we could probably come up with a really long list of benefits and costs, but I'm just going to put a few up there that I think are very relevant. So status in the group is actually going to be a big factor when we're analyzing this particular game, and any variable that I want to put into the bully's objective function, I should name it. And why is status in the group a factor? So if the bully bullies someone and none of their friends stand up to that, then the bully has kind of increased their status in the group. They've shown that they can do things that other people might not like, and nobody will challenge them. So there's a potential that their status in the group could go up from bullying. Now there's also a potential their status in the group could go down from bullying. For example, if their friend stands up for the victim and everybody sort of supports that friend, then the bully has lost status in the group. Now another reason I think people bully is just they get a sense of superiority. Like bullying usually is putting someone else down, making someone feel bad, and that gives the bully a sense of superiority over the person they're bullying and a sense of power over them. I do think these could be separate factors, but to keep things simple, in this model I'm just going to have power as sort of the psychological benefit of bullying from their perspective. Now we have to ask the question, for people who don't bully, or maybe even people who might have a tendency to bully, when do they choose not to? We need some costs to bullying. And I'm keeping things simple here, so I'm just going to have 2 costs. You could probably brainstorm a lot more costs than this. One is status. The second one is values. Maybe the bully actually does care about other people. Maybe they're a little bit altruistic. So both of those could play a role. Now let's come up with an objective function for the bully. Alright, and to just keep things simple, I'm going to go with this objective function, which only has 2 components. It's the status in the group of the bully and their sense of power over the person they're bullying. And both of those, of course, are a function of whether or not they bully. Now you notice there's a few exogenous variables in this model, where exogenous variables are just variables that don't change when our choice variable changes. So we have 3 exogenous variables. 2 of those are just importance weights. And importance weights allow us to personalize this model to the particular person. So for some people, they place a heavy weight on power over the person they're bullying. For others, they may place a heavier weight on status in the group. And inserting these importance weights sort of allows us to do these thought experiments to think about how different personality types, different types of people might interact in this situation. Because not all bullies are the same. Now, this exogenous variable is going to be the reaction of the group. Now everything in this model is from the bully's perspective, but this is sort of the bully's anticipation of how the group would respond if they bully. And if the bully believes that people will go along with him in the group, if that's their belief about the dynamic in the group, that's certainly going to lead to a high expectation that bullying could increase their status in the group. Whereas if the bully believes that the group would reject the bullying, and if someone stood up to the bully, everybody else would go with that person, then this is going to be a negative term. Increasing your bullying will decrease your status in the group. There's a negative relationship between these two things. That's the bully's objective function. Now we need to fill out the table with the bully's payoffs. How might we do this? Well, we have to kind of think through this and adjust and readjust things to capture the scenario. So first of all, we have a scenario where the bully does not bully. And if the bully doesn't bully, there's not going to be a chance for anyone to defend the victim because there's no victim. So these two payoffs for the bully should be the same. And these are baseline payoffs. It doesn't really matter what numbers we choose. I'm going to put a value of 5 in here because there's positive utility from just having the group of friends, but everything else we put in the table is going to be sort of relative to that particular utility. Doesn't matter where you start. Now I need to think about if the bully bullies and nobody stands up for the victim, what kind of utility will the bully get? And in thinking this through, of course, the bully is bullying because they believe that they get some sort of value out of that, hoping that nobody stands up to them. And so they believe their status in the group will go up and their power over the victim will go up. So certainly whatever this value is, it needs to be higher than 5. Now, if the bully bullies someone and a member of the group stands up to them and defends the victim, we know that's going to lower the bully's status in the group to some degree. So this is going to give us a lower utility than if the bully had not bullied in the first place. And I could have put that as a negative number. Alright, so we have the bully's payoffs. We have payoffs that kind of make sense for the situation for the bully. Now we need to model the friend's incentives. And to do this, we need to do the same thing. We need to have costs and benefits to defending the victim or not. Alright, so we got the benefits and the costs. The biggest benefit is going to be living out your values and sort of knowing that you can live out your values. There's huge benefits to self-esteem if you have the ability to stand up to a bully. And there's also going to be, in both the benefits and the costs, the potential for a change in your status in the group. If you defend the victim against the bully and everyone sides with you, then you've actually increased your status in the group. You've shown that you're the person to sort of enforce good social values in the group, and people will look up to you. That's sort of a leader kind of thing to do. But if you defend the victim and everybody is too afraid to go along with you and they side with the bully, your status in the group could actually go down. Now, one of the big costs here is the possibility of discomfort. That confronting the bully is going to involve some sort of discomfort of the possible conflict that goes along with that. So let's just write this up into a utility function for the friend. Okay, so we've got the utility of the friend for whether or not they defend the victim is going to be a function of, well, 3 components, and each of these has an importance weight such that each particular person, depending on their character and their personality, has a different weight they place on each of these things. And the first thing they care about is living out their values, which is going to give them self-esteem, etc., etc. Second thing has an importance weight, and it is their status in the group, and that status depends on whether or not they defend the victim, and it depends on R, which is the response of other members of the group. So the status could go up or it could go down depending on the group's response. R is the exogenous variable capturing the nature of the group. And then minus confrontation, and of course we put a minus sign in front of anything that's bad. And confrontation, the experience of confrontation is generally bad. And I put gamma in here as this is going to be sort of the personality of the bully. Like, how mean are they in confrontations? How spiteful are they? Just generally, it's a variable that's going to capture something about the bully's personality. And so now we have a utility function that we can think through, and we're going to fill in the payoffs of the table with our objective function of our friend in mind. And we know that if the bully doesn't bully, you won't get a chance to either defend or not defend the victim. So we're in the same situation where your utility is just going to be your baseline utility from being in the friend group, which is probably the same as the bully's baseline utility. The key ones we care about are going to be these two, so we need to think through. If the bully bullies and you do not defend, what is your utility? And almost certainly this is going to be a case that your utility is going to be lower than the 5. It would be hard to make a case where your utility goes up based on someone else in the group bullying. So the utility could be 2, it could be 0, it could be negative. I'm going to make it negative because it feels pretty bad to have someone in the group bullying someone, and for you not to stand up for that, that feels pretty bad. So I'm going to give that a utility in the negative realm. Now, this utility obviously depends on the personality of the victim. So these particular payoffs depend heavily on the personality and values and experience of the particular friend in question. But we know there's 2 scenarios. One is the scenario where this ends up being the case, where we have a bully and nobody stands up for them. And the other scenario we have is this one. And oftentimes if there's someone in the group who is the type to stand up to the bully, to defend the victim, then we're going to end up in a Nash equilibrium down here. And the bully kind of knows that and doesn't bully in the first place because they don't want their status to go down from bullying. But let me put in a number here. Okay, in this case I chose a number that is higher than that. And so this would be someone who, when they defended the victim, they raised their status in the group, they raised their self-esteem, they did all kinds of positive things. In which case, let's solve this particular game theory matrix and see what happens. This won't be the only scenario. We'll need to change some of the payoffs for other scenarios, but let's see what happens here. Okay, in this scenario, we have one Nash equilibrium, and that Nash equilibrium is for the bully to choose not to bully in the group. The existence of a person, a friend in the group, who has these payoffs, who will definitely defend the victim if anyone in the group bullies, the existence of them actually leads to this nice equilibrium where there's no bullying. So this is one scenario, and this is going to be the goal scenario in our policy analysis. Now, this relies centrally on this utility being higher than this utility. And the fact that we do observe friend groups where this situation happens, where there's bullying and nobody is standing up to the bully, means that there must be situations where the friend makes a different decision. So we look at our game theory matrix and we have to figure out how can we adjust the payoffs to capture that scenario. If we had a higher payoff for the friend in this box than this box, then this is going to be one of the Nash equilibriums at play. So let me do that. Okay, in this case, I actually only changed one payoff in the table. That was this one. This person gets negative utility, worse negative utility from trying to defend the victim than from not defending them. So by changing this one payoff, we now have two Nash equilibriums. One of them is the Nash equilibrium that we don't like, which is where the bully bullies and nobody in the group defends, or where each member of the group is making the decision not to defend the victim. So now we've identified the key piece of the puzzle here, which is that the relative utility of the friend of these two payoffs is going to determine whether we end up in a good equilibrium or a bad equilibrium. So we have to ask the question, when would we get this bad scenario? When would we get a situation where defending the victim led to worse utility, a worse payoff in expectation, that is, than not defending the victim? And we can come down to our utility function and think, well, okay, one thing that could be going on is that the person places a heavy weight on confrontation. This matters to them a lot. They're very afraid of confrontation. And it could be that the bully is just really mean if confronted. Or it could be that even if the bully isn't that mean if confronted, the person just has a very high importance weight on confrontation and is afraid of that. So these two factors are going to play a big role in determining which equilibrium we end up in. It could, however, also be the status thing. It could be that the friend believes that if they defend the victim, nobody will support them. Everyone's going to support the bully, and in which case their status goes down by trying to defend the victim because they will have shown that, oh, I'm trying to go against the bully to defend the victim and nobody supports me. I'm definitely lower status than the bully in this group, and I've shown that definitively. So it's possible even that this could be playing a role in having this payoff be lower than this payoff. So if we're trying to come up with a solution to the problem, we might want to focus on both of these things. All right, Well, I think that's enough for now. My next game that I'm going to model in a different video is going to relate to the reaction of the group. So we want to know if we've had a scenario where the bully has bullied and one member of the group has defended, what do other people decide? Do they support the bully or do they support the defender? Because that could have an impact on this payoff matrix. So I hope you found this helpful and interesting in thinking through how would you actually start from scratch analyzing a problem using game theory, and this is just a very structured way of analyzing strategic interactions between people.